Michael, my... Welcome to Speak Sex. I'm your host, Eurydice, and today's guest is my old and dear friend, Michael Brody, who is a filmmaker, poet, and the founder of a film festival at Crested Butte in Colorado, which actually is having its annual event this month on the 23rd of September until the 3rd of October. So Crested Butte is a charming, kind of iconic little town, right? And you'll tell us more about it, Michael. So welcome on the show.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me. It's great to see you.
Yeah, you too.
Speaking with you again. Yeah.
So Michael and I went to college together. So he just reminded me we've known each other many decades. What is it?
I think 35 or 37 years. It's unbelievable, but it's true.
Yeah.
Yeah, like lifetimes.
Yeah, it's
sure.
nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we feel, about each other, I think, the way we did when we first met. I think we met in that coffee shop in Boulder, Colorado, right? What was that called?
The Brillig.
Brillig, yes.
Brillig Works.
That's right.
On the hill. It's been replaced by Starbucks, but it still lives in our...
Yeah, oh no, yeah. I loved it so much. So much thinking took place there, in that coffee shop. So anyway, since CU, where Michael studied film with Stan Brakhage, among other people, but, Stan's the most famous, Michael published a book of poetry, wrote like 6 or 7 screenplays, and something like 11 years ago, I think, visited Crested Butte and where there had been a film festival, right, in the past, and it had stopped. And I guess kind of like, in one of those impulsive then and there moments, I decided to like revive it, right? So, I'd love to hear more about the film festival, which apparently, has been doing very well since then. And then I would also like to talk to you, kind of like on a human to human level about, healing, masculinity, like the spiritual and emotional practice that you've done for so many years. I know you were in a men's group for like over a decade. Boulder, for me personally, was where I discovered a lot of these, practices that have guided me and stayed with me since. And I was like, 20. So, I took with me so much from that, kind of spiritual aspect of Boulder. I remember, walking into like alfalfas or wild oats, it was just like a tiny little cramped place with only like foods in bulk, right? So that was before like the revival of healthy eating and yoga, everywhere. And so it was definitely a place of birth for a lot of these movements, I think. And you've been there and you've stayed there, and what that means for you. Being a father of 2 girls, being a creative, and, having gone through these practices of like, trying to find, conscious masculinity and also, work and raise kids and have relationships, marriages.
Yeah, that's pretty much everything.
I know,
yeah.
Right?
Right.
What have you learned, or, what has been different? And yeah.
Well, where I'd like to start, and I think you mentioned it really well, is I grew up 40 miles away from where I live right now in Denver, Colorado. And it was a very sort of standard suburban American upbringing where there was nothing exceptional or spiritual about it. I was raised in a Jewish home, and that was part of my culture. But other than sort of learning to pray and close your eyes and connect to God or the divine, there was not a lot there. And it in subsequent years it showed that there was it was a real void, and it was very lacking. So it's interesting to choose a place like Boulder, and there's other places. There's Boulder, there's Santa Fe, there's Santa Cruz, there's hundreds of places, San Francisco, where spirituality is much more common. I think that going to a place like India, where it's just a part of society and culture, and in my upbringing and perhaps in America, it was very lacking. That maybe we are a very spiritualist people that are trying to kind of reconnect with that. So coming to a place like Boulder and then moving to Santa Fe 4 years later was a real awakening, in the sense of all of a sudden there's these very alternative ways of seeing things, of living your life, of understanding yourself and your things like that. So I like that for both of us, it was an awakening out of the life we had into something that would really stick with us, which is, maybe the spiritual practice or meditation, or almost a sense of looking for a mystical union with the divine as a way out of this very standard American suburban upbringing that doesn't inform a life and doesn't steer in a real way. So it was interesting to come to Boulder, and and you and I were, and you more so, were very bohemian, very avant-garde artists, writers, cigarette smokers. So,
yeah, we were misfits. I was totally an outlier.
You were totally an out. The most common thing that people would say when they saw you is, "Who is that? Where did she come from? Why is she here? Like, why are you here among us?"
I know.
Yeah. And you were a gift from
another
Egypt,
planet,
from Lesbos,
yeah.
from New York,
yeah.
and you landed in this very weird college mountain town in Colorado. Like, what the fuck are you doing here?
I don't know.
But we're glad you're here. And yeah, I mean, I think you were part of this sort of greater awakening also for very standard white suburban kids like me. And, I love that there's a way that we hopefully get woken up to certain things. And then once we're awake, then we're seeing, and particularly in Boulder, there's a lot of options you can go. You can go into meditation, you can go into men's work. But this sort of underlying spirituality of like, what does a person need to get through this life successfully and in a healthy way, and deal with our stuff and create and have relationships, all that.
And the other part of it, I mean, it's a kind of spirituality that includes the body, which I appreciated a lot, because in our traditions, our monotheistic traditions, kind of like spirit was exclusive of body. And that was a split, like an antithesis that was very painful, and then being like a person of the, 70s and 80s, and 90s, there was also kind of a split between the body and the mind. It's like, I'm all mind, I'm in charge, so Boulder was the first place where I actually began to respect, the body again, since Lesbos, like the way that I had been taught, and then I had discounted when I, decided to masculinize, to identify with like very much with like, the powers, and in Boulder, like a group of us would go to Chautauqua and howl at the moon, or like have a menstruation ceremony, or so like the presence, kind of like being aware of the body and incorporating it in spiritual practice was definitely a new, like a revelation for me there, and it put me onto my path of trying to integrate, our seeming contradictions, a path that kind of like I stayed on. I'm from Boulder. I went to India soon after. I wouldn't have done it, had I not gone there. So, but yeah, so tell me a little about, tell our listeners also, about your men's group and what you learned, did, discovered.
Sure. I think before I go there, I want to go back and just
Sure.
Second something you said, because I remember when I was at CU, even though I was as a kid very athletic and I played sports and soccer and lacrosse, and so I was very fit and athletic in a way. I remember walking around Boulder and just thinking that I was basically my mind. I was all my mind, and maybe that's the educational process and university reinforces that. But I remember saying that my body was like a podium for my mind and for my head, and there was this complete separation from one to the other. And I think that being here, leaving academia and sort of going into these other possibilities, which are grouped together as kind of the new age, it was really this idea of discovering the body, and there's a term for it here called somatic, which has to do with the body, and consciousness to me just can't be in one's head, because that's very mental and that's a lot of thoughts and things like that. And how do I bring awareness into my body and integrate the two and start listening to other things besides mind and logic, and start listening to my heart, my gut, things like that, and just try to reintegrate these two very separated portions of myself. And so,
right.
But I think that writing and creativity and poetry and screenplays they're a fairly mental process, but in that process is, how do we access the muse, or how do we access the body and the heart, so that informs our writing and really gives it much more dimension and depth and and blood and things like that to it. So
and I do think that for men it's a quest that it's a pretty like important and sacred and difficult quest that like contemporary men should consider undertaking, because so much has been forbidden to those who identify as male by normative, heteronormative, but also homonormative culture, so all those experiences that have been associated with like weakness or receiving or depending, or serving, have been denied, and it's a very it's an imbalance, but it's also really uncomfortable for men who have been trained a certain way, to become whole again. So, how to do that in a way that doesn't make you feel bad about yourself, or make you feel like you're being, taken advantage or used or, diminished, is a challenge. And I think that's part of like our challenge in the present moment, is to find ways to mediate and kind of like recast the rites of passage, let's say, of masculinity. And there are many, from like adolescence until old age. Yeah.
Yeah, I think where I started from was, again, this very sort of buddy-like, chum-like way of relating to men through sports. And so, it was the guys on the soccer team, and it was, there was a certain bond and a certain union, but also just a certain way that the way we could relate and what we could speak about was very, very limited. We could speak about obviously winning and playing and all that. And then, then we could, in other moments we could talk about sex and we could talk about drug use and things like that. But how does, for me, it was this evolution. How can I relate to men in a different way than this very chum-like, buddy-like, very limited way of relating, and relate to men in a different way, in a much more honest way, where I think men are told that there's so much. This is even painful to say and to realize that there's so much of who we are that it's just flat out not allowed. The first 21 years of your life, you get to exist in a certain way, but that other stuff, no thanks. Don't go there. No one wants to hear it. It's not being a man. And I'm just feeling right now the pain of like having that cut off. It was just like, that's not okay. And then, in this process of waking up, we learn that we can go to those places and talk about those things and really feel those things and communicate those things to men in particular. And we, our relationship with men is basically forged with our fathers, and that has a lot of limitations to it. And I think that how amazing to be in the world with men and women and learn new ways of relating and being honest and just going for it and not holding yourself back. And so that was, that was a very interesting process that really lasted for me probably 15 years. I even want to maybe say 20, until I moved to Crested Butte, where there wasn't really that community. And in moving, I thought that's one of the things I'm going to really give up, unless I tried to, and I tried to create men's groups in Crested Butte, and they were, semi-successful, but, it forced me to go back to this way of relating to men that was like in my teens, and that wasn't, I would try to bring that into the moment, but it wasn't as allowed in a mountain ski town, very outdoor oriented, where it's all macho and it's all about substances and things like that. And so it was kind of a way of not being real that I've just come out of. And because I think all what we're talking about is learning these sort of tools that we can use that we weren't really given as a kid. And, living in a place like Boulder or seeing films or reading books, there's things that we can take from them that we know are going to be valuable tools for us. And I mean, my experience is, over 60 years, that, man, I need a whole bunch of tools. There's a way I can operate without needing tools for a couple days or a few hours, and then stuff comes up and it's like, whoa, okay, how do I deal with this one? And, hopefully that life is this process of accumulating the tools and the resources we need to really function and thrive and not suck in our lives. Yeah.
Right. And also like the permissions, the role modeling. I think like, it's all a matter of like, freedom, and it starts with like imagining something else, and I think that part of men's burden has been this sense that he is responsible, let's say, for, every birth. That sense that, I made a woman, like scream and yell and bleed and, have a child. And now I am, bonded and bound to, like, support them both, or something, and many men eventually act out or wait until the child is older to act out. And, but it is, it's all false. And it's all, it's the same as saying, men can or can't wear this or that, whatever it may be. Like, I'm not just talking about skirts. I'm talking about anything, materials, colors, hats, makeup. It doesn't really matter. It's just, how, like, liberating it feels for a guy to just, like, paint his nails. I mean, it's insane the amount of restraints, and censorship that we are putting, on our XY chromosome people. and I think that by discussing the patriarchy in terms of, like, some sort of gender, even though gender is obsolete now, thankfully, we do not, like, acknowledge how it is a burden, for everybody pretty much equally, which I think it is. In the same way that, like, any gender can be the patriarch, at any given time. In the same way, I think that, everyone is kind of, like, equally caged in their prescribed roles that are pretty much prescribed, like, at birth, right? So, we're all, like, born more or less, I guess, equal and completely innocent. And very quickly, by the accident of our birth, we're, like, forced to learn who we're supposed to be. And when you think about it, like, rationally, how much of this, restrained we take on willingly and we just accept without questioning is insane. It's just insane. So, we're just encouraged to not think about it. We're encouraged, it's like distraction, think about anything bad, Yeah. So I feel that in a sense, every man has, this shedding of skin after skin after skin to do, through life, at the same time that he has to kind of, like, hold this balance of, like, doing things the way it's expected, right? So it's kind of like a constant, like, balancing, like, on the beam, like, or in mid-air, where you are normative as much as you must, and at the same time that you are seeking to find liberty as much as you can, yeah. And I think it used to be that, like, macho activities, like war, or like sports, for example, that lasted, like, for decades, were a way to kind of, like, take one's attention away from this, because there was, survival at stake. Like, it's, when it's life and death, you just, like, stick with what you got here, because so it seems to me like the culture keeps creating, like, false emergencies, all the time, to get our attention away from what's real, Yeah. But anyway, you had unconventionally enough marriages, and the I know, and you definitely, married women who were, strong and, like goddess-like women. So that already kind of, like, broke a bunch of cliches, I think. And I know, like, your sister, and, you're surrounded by strong and and unusual women, I think.
Mm.
And your
Like
your
you,
daughters, yeah.
yes, yeah. Wow, there's so much to say there. Yeah, I mean, I think in a way that, particularly with my first marriage, was this sense of, yeah, there's a lot of tools and things I can learn here, and I need that. I think that, I mean, for me, it's asking the question, well, what is the ultimate goal in this lifetime? And I think that there's a lot of, as you were saying, when you're born, there's a lot of things that happen, and a lot of impositions that are placed on all of us. And I mean, I think that, and then that's why the story and the allegory of the fall is so important, because I feel that it's very true of me, and maybe it's really true of all of us. I mean, I don't know where I came from, and I don't know what it felt like before I incarnated. But I think we know what it's like once we do incarnate, and there's a lot of things, and obviously, okay, for those of our listeners that don't know, I'm a white male, so I'm already American. I'm like, what is that, 98% already, or 99? And so I have certain privileges that certainly the rest of the world was not born with, and still there are things that happen to all of us in different ratios that we have to overcome. And I think that, to me, it begs the question of, well, what is this life, and is there a spiritual purpose to it, a spiritual purpose to it, and an emotional purpose? And yeah, all these things happen, and what is the outcome? What are we trying to work at and achieve? And for me, it's this sense of of recovering from the fall, of going from innocence to humanness. And there's a lot of weight. There's tons of weight that comes with humanness. If you're born woman, or if you're born black, or if you're born a black woman and a poor black woman, there's so many layers of things that happen to us. And maybe most people don't ever recover from that. But to me, it's been a working through all this stuff to sort of try to get back to this more pure, more spiritual place, because that's all I've been able to figure out in my 60 years. Like, wow, what do I do with all this? And how do I live, and how do I function, and how do I thrive? And so to me, that's been the answer that I've come up with, is there just needs to be this, like, returning to hopefully what we know in our body and the way our body feels. And as much as we can, going back there. There's a man named Jed McKenna who's published some books, very sort of sarcastic and caustic books about spirituality, like Spirituality, the Darndest Thing. And basically, to him, the enlightenment process, the process of waking up, is very simple. He says, sit down, shut up, and then ask yourself what's true until you know it. And so, a lot of my life was like, I wanted lightning bolts to go off, or I wanted God to speak to me saying, Michael, this is what you have to do, because that's the easier way. And that's giving authority to somebody else. And I had to ask myself at the end of my first marriage, I wanted God to speak to me and say what to do and how to do it, and give authority to someone else and abdicate responsibility. So I walked around for a couple of days in Boulder, hoping for the word of God to come to me, and it didn't. And so then I had to come up with an answer myself, and I had to take responsibility, right or wrong, whether or not I should do this. And it felt like the first time in my life I actually had to make a decision. Do I stay married or do I not? And God didn't speak to me. And it's like, oh fuck, I guess it's up to me. Okay, this is what I decide, and go with it. And that was powerful. That was, freeing. And like, I don't know everything. I don't have all the information, and I just got to decide. And I liked that. And I liked, it's very empowering that says, dude, it's up to you. There's no one else to save your ass. This is your decision, and you got to make it. And it was great. It was very freeing to do that, right or wrong. I'm sure I know I made the right decision. At the time, I wasn't sure, but I knew. And how do you pull upon your resources, and how do you decide? It was great.
Yeah. I feel that when we're at a place of crossroads, that's where we do a lot of our learning. And both like personally in our lives, and also like as cultures, because like you say, suddenly like you feel like the stakes are high, everything will change. Do you dare like, walk out into the unknown and leave the known? And that's like a big ass question, And when you do, and you don't like crash into the abyss, that's like a great discovery. Once you've done it a couple of times, then, you start seeing that, wait, the odds are, I will survive.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And going into, and that I think leads into emotional work and spiritual work. That I remember I had a therapist here that he said, is this going to kill you? Do you think this is going to kill you if you go into it? I mean, are you going to basically blow up? Because is your heart going to actually literally blow up and you'll die if you go into that, if you go into your pain or whatever? And having gone through that a few times, or a number of times, or certainly as many times as I need to, the answer is no, I won't have a heart attack. I won't have a stroke. I mean, I will maybe one day, but it's probably not going to be related to dealing with my emotional body. It's probably going to be related to something else. But if you know that you can survive that and get through it and come out on the other side healthy and clearer and more directed, it's worth doing. I think it's worth doing that work. Whether or not most people do that, I don't know.
Well, like you were saying, also people have to have resources, time, accessibility. I feel that now on Zoom it's easier to find, but it's still like to keep, to make the commitment and to stay with it when it's harder. It's a lot. It's a lot. But that's where like, kind of like, your inner, like, your inner angel or demon, comes in, like that part of you that keeps wondering, and asking questions. And that's where, good art, like films, for example, or, meaningful writing or a meaningful, artwork, visual art, play a part, as messengers, reminding us of like universal truths,
Exactly.
I mean, this past year, just look at how often, films like The Matrix, which I call the Patrix, but in any case, other than that, it's like, wait, this has nothing to do with the maternal. But, that, these films get evoked and remembered, and people are, people from both sides, or all sides, however many sides there are actually, because I don't think we're really like dichotomous the way that, newspaper, headlines presented. I think we're dichotomous, so to speak. It's not like one or the other. But in any case, how often a film like that is evoked as like a documentary or, prophetic. And it just, all that says is that it spoke to something that we all understand and experience in life more than once, and it is the time of choice. It's the time of being at the crossroads of choice. Whatever you want to call it, take the right path or the left path, the hard path or the easy path, the red pill or the blue pill, or whatever you want to call it. I feel that there are those stories that we tell again and again and have told, since we've been able to communicate with each other, because that's how we change. And that's how we evolve. And so being able to making this choice consciously, and not from a place of like reactivity is important, like not because you're like in antithesis to someone, not because you just like hate your soon to be ex, or not because your lawyer tells you you're gonna like whatever, win or something, or be defeated if you don't. But from a place of like consciousness of where you're at and where you're going.
I think that one of the things that's going on for me is, and you said two words that I really like: change and evolve. And I know in my life I have to do that. Maybe because feeling like I've come from a pretty unconscious place to begin with. And I feel like I'm lucky in the sense of, like location, where you're born is so important. Like, are you born in Syria? Are you born in a ghetto? Where are you born? And, for me, I was born out in the Western United States, which to me equates with, space, like physical space. You're right in the middle of nature. And what is nature but the universe, the divine, the whole cosmos? It's unity consciousness. It's the one. Then the one is a really huge concept to wrap my brain around, especially when I'm angry at people that are nearby me, but I'm a cell, they're a cell. One part of the oneness is mad at another part. And but I like the sense of spaciousness and nature and being, it's in a way it's like being born in a beautiful church, or you're born in nature, you're born in beauty, you're born in the divine, you're born in part of the universe. And I think you recognize that. And I think we're part of the universe if we're in Boston too. But, having the sense of the wonder of nature right around me has been a really big thing. Also, what I like doing is, I don't want to blame anyone. Like, they did this. Like, I think there's this expectation that people should be different. Now, people are like, you're supposed to be you and I'm supposed to be me. And the way you are may ruffle my feathers and may trigger me and may bring up stuff in me, but it's not like you are supposed to be any different. You are you, and I'll either relate to you really well or stuff will come up. But I mean, I like knowing that that's my stuff to deal with, and it's not about you, and it's not about blaming the other person, but, how do I go back to that place of I'm at home in the West, I'm at home in nature, I'm at home in the universe, how do I get to be at home in my body, which I think is really it. And yeah, stuff comes up and we get mad and we're disappointed, or I get mad, I'm disappointed, I feel unloved, all that stuff. and that's kind of what's meant to happen until I'm so able to work it.
Regenerate. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
reconnect and know that I am, because there's something much vaster loving me than this,
Right.
52-year-old woman,
Yeah.
that is doing her own thing, right? And
Yeah.
has her own stuff going
No,
on.
and you're someone, I mean, I know, through the years that, a little bit like, St. Anthony in the desert, like every so often when those times come, you just go off into the, Utah desert or some desert. And I think the
Exactly.
emptiness and the openness of that space, helps you.
It does. It does for sure. I knew you as a writer. You had already written 2 or 3 novels at that point. I know you've really gone into painting and into more visual realm and one image to tell what you want to tell. I think that, and so I think part of my, it's great to know all these things, and it's great to communicate them to you and to your audience. But I've also felt, what's my purpose creatively, and then what's the best audience to tell that to. And, I had a background in poetry, and I still write poetry, and I love poetry. I love that it's, 45 minutes of my life, and something can be created and named and had and completed. I like that, as opposed to spending months on a screenplay and then trying to get funding, and then 6 years later or 10 years later, the film comes out or it doesn't. But I think what I learned early on is, because Boulder is a poetry town, and because of Naropa, and because of Allen Ginsberg and all the beat poets that were here, that's a wonderful thing. But we don't live in a country like Argentina, where 70,000 people go to hear Neruda, or Chile to hear Neruda speak, or like Europe. And America has a very small poetry audience. We have great poets here, but we're not packing soccer stadiums to hear poetry. So, I'm curious of what's the form for me, and how do I talk about all these things creatively, not just to you and to your audience, which is probably bigger than my audience. What's the form to talk about this? Is it film? Is it fiction? And I think so. For me, having just had my 60th birthday, it's the question of, like, what do I do with all this, and how do I share what I know in a way that maybe impacts the evolution of our race as human beings in a positive way. And
Yeah.
I think that's to me an interesting conversation, because assuming that I do have a few things to say, and knowing that I have things that were beneficial to me that may not be beneficial to everyone, I'm looking at engaging in, how do I talk about this whole path that I've been on and we've all been on in a creative, beneficial way.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, that makes you a teacher already. You've just described that, and I think that's, and you've had that from the beginning. I mean, you've always been, I've always admired, for example, your lack of greed, and it's very, unusual. You've never been after, I haven't known you to go after like material goods intensely, in a way that it defines many other people after a certain age, and it comes from our sense of like insecurity or mortality, or our place, in the structure, which is a pyramid structure or whatever. So you've already been kind of like a freer man than the average, I think, and even your career choices, confirm that. Like, you could have chosen to just make money, and you have chosen to, pursue creative work and bring people together, which is what the festival does, creative people together. So I think that kind of like, the next step of that is what you're looking for and what you're trying to describe. And I think it's the noblest of all, that we want to kind of like pass on. I mean, that's what distinguishes us, our species, that we want to pass on, what little we've learned and share, right, and give. There is like such a wonderful renaissance in a sense of this movement of like people teaching people, outside the gates of academia. And so, and there are different ways where we can continue learning and then sharing what we learn with each other. And when it happens, organically, I think, it does make a difference to society. So like, for example, this podcast, it's free, and we don't know, what seeds are being planted where, but
Exactly.
I think that it's heartfelt, and it is, our kind of like cry, out, as like a gift of, this is my energy, take it, this like, take off of us. And find a way to make it your own, so like in a way it's like reaching out and saying, hold my hand and I'll hold your hand and I'll keep you there, no matter what. And I think that that's really what is wanted, that sense of like, we're here for the love of all people, and not really because we want anybody to to give us anything, whether it's like whatever, anything superficial, like dollars or Bitcoin, or like fame or infamy. So to me, that's like one of like my golden rules. Like I go where I feel authentic, and I stay away where I feel like, too much, vanity and hassle and, And so, and America, which, what you're saying about your location, where you live is part of like that amazing, pioneer thing, that America kind of like likes to experiment, in a way that I think is unique, it's in a laboratory. it's and it has been for whatever now, more than 2 centuries. So, it's alive, and a lot's happening and a lot spills out. And as people come in and, with all the connectivity that we have now, with our digital lifestyle, we're just like cross-pollinating nonstop. So, yeah, there are many ways to share what you have, learned and what you want to give the world. And there will always be, people who will hold your hand and, and receive it. I feel that when you get like a powerful idea or a powerful message and you're sure of it, and it's not just because you're looking to stand out, but you're sure of it, then it is worth going into these more traditional formats, and giving it like much more of your time. But only then, if you just want to say like the story of how you did what, or, oh, you had an idea, what, or you want to say, oh, this works for me, or, all this, there's kind of like an over abundance. And then, the big topics, sometimes like, get lost in all the gossip. So yeah, all the gossip belongs where it is, like TikTok, social media, what you call like Zoom, even podcasts, it's more like of the moment. So that medium, YouTube, you just make a YouTube, whatever. There are countless ways. I used to be on Vimeo, Substack, I write on Substack, Medium, whatever. There are countless ways, blogging. I don't know, are we still blogging? But there are now, for that sort of messaging. But I feel that it's only when you actually get like sui generis, something, a vision, an idea that, is extraordinary, like the Patrix, that then it's worth, going back to the old, format, because it's worth the time and getting it right, because that's a gift for the centuries.
Right.
But
right.
If it's a gift for like the year,
or
the annual crop of ideas, exactly. You don't have to like sit there and write a screenplay about it, and then it goes straight to video, and you know what I mean. You don't have to like work that hard and take all the photo shoots and, found things and, launch things. And then, it's just, Yeah,
I think it harkens back to there are certain classical things like art and film and craft, and really, figuring out what you have to say
and discriminating, discriminating is important, which I think the marketplace will not do for us, so we gotta do it for ourselves. The marketplace will be like, give me, what else do you have? What do you have now? Because whatever, they don't care if they publish 100 books and one is a bestseller. They don't care if like, how much does it make to make a film now? Not that much anymore, so it's like, what, give me and whatever, it's like, playing cards like for the marketplace, but for you, the maker, that's a lot of life. That's a lot of investment, that's a lot. So knowing for yourself, like developing that self-discriminatory, instrument where you can tell when and if you have something of greater or, universal kind of like importance. I think that's useful.
And that's I feel like I'm in an amazing position as someone who curates and programs a film festival, because there's all these people, like hundreds and hundreds of films we look at over the year, and I get to see the product. I wasn't there in the writing stage. I wasn't there on set when it was 102 degrees. And I just get to see the creation and the beauty. And that is one of the favorite parts of my job. And as our festival is coming up in 3 weeks, I have such admiration for the filmmakers who are part of our festival. And, Telluride Film Festival is starting today, and that even has all these other films what an immensely creative people we are. And so in my position, it's wonderful to see something, whether it's in a 10-minute film, to see something that I've never seen before, to see something that takes place underwater, that's like an underwater ballet that is indescribable. And all I know to do with it is to program it. I mean, for a filmmaker, our festival is really good numbers and really good odds. We looked at probably 600 films, and we're almost showing 100. So that's one out of 6 chance. That's 16%.
That's a lot of films.
It's a lot of films, but Sundance gets something like 18,000 films from all over the world, and they choose 150 40 of them, and that's not good odds for the filmmaker. But
And what about Telluride?
Telluride is, that's kind of, I think that's more invitational. I don't know quite how that festival works. I know it works in a huge way and in a big way. And I don't think they're dealing with individual filmmakers. I think they're more dealing with distribution companies and things like that. That's my perspective on it.
But so you do use that discriminatory tool that, I was talking about when you go through, the 600 and then you cut them down to 100 and you ask certain questions, I guess, about them as you go through this process of eliminating.
I've watched virtual film festivals, and all of a sudden we're outside. The state of Colorado is predominantly white. A ski town like Crested Butte is even more so. And so, I think that, one of what I'm charged to do is to bring different points of view and different people into our community that aren't really allowed financially to live there. And so
or travel there.
Yes, exactly. And so to say we are a much larger group than what we see here, and bring those voices and those stories to frankly a community that really wants them and wants to hear them and needs to hear them and looks forward to hearing them.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, I hope to come one of these years. Every year I put it off, but it's on my list. I'll be there.
Yes, good.
Wait for me.
No, we're going.
So it's September 23rd to October 3rd. And the best place for people to find you guys is either on your website, Crested Butte filmfestival.org, is it?
Yeah, it's easier than that. It's cbfilmfest.org. And yes, our dates are the September 24th through October 3rd. And we are showing virtually. So people
that's
can.
Great. Find the link. You're on Instagram, Facebook. I'll include all that. And
yes.
Yeah.
And so it's just it's I think some of the best stories that humans have created and shared with each other, and it's just it's like the best of us, which is maybe we all want to see a little more of.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah,
we do.
Yeah.
So thank you for coming, and thank you for being so open with and wonderful.
My pleasure.
And thank you everybody out there for listening and for being with us another week. Lots of love to all people, and until next week, keep speaking sex. If I could make love incessantly, I would be God. My name is Eurydice Eve, and I'm a writer and artist best known for writing for Scribner and Spin, and these are my conversations with leaders in diverse human communities. Join our flow and stay with us for a while.